legislation to Select Committee.
Nicky Wagner.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to support this Heritage New Zealand Pouhere Taonga Bill. As you heard from the Minister, this bill will replace the Historic Places Act of 1993, and it changes the governance structure of the Historic Places Trust. It introduces new archaeological provisions and new emergency provisions. It will also update the drafting of their bill and improve the workability of the Act. Now, the New Zealand Historic Places Trust was established in 1955 as a voluntary organisation, but it is now an autonomous Crown entity with statutory responsibilities, and over the years has developed into a professional organisation with over 100 full-time equivalent staff. Over the years, the members of the Historic Place Trust have done wonderful work. Volunteers have worked long and hard to identify, to protect and to restore and to raise the profile and appreciation of the heritage of our country. However, as the organisation has become more professional and mostly funded by the Crown, there's been some confusion and some tensions between the volunteers and the members of the branch committees and the staff of the organisations and their statutory responsibilities. The Crown now provides 80% of the New Zealand Historic Places Trust funding of a total budget of about $15 million. And less than 5% of that income comes from membership subscriptions. The new bill will allow for ongoing membership, but it disestablishes the branch committees. Volunteers will be encouraged to support the work of the organisation. For example, they do a lot of work in terms of managing and guiding and being involved with the 48 historic places that are administered by the Trust. But others who want a more active role in advocacy will be encouraged to form new independent organisations, and Heritage New Zealand is interested in working in partnership with these organisations. As the MP for Christchurch Central, I am particularly interested in the provisions of the bill that concern emergency authorities. But before I discuss this further, I'd like to pay tribute to the Historic Places Trust and the work that they've been doing in Christchurch since the earthquakes. Malcolm Duff and his team have worked tirelessly, and we've seen them day after day under really difficult circumstances in and out of Civil Defence headquarters, trying to get the best possible outcomes for heritage and for our special buildings in Christchurch. And the problems were absolutely magnified by the significant number of earthquakes, simply because they had to keep on looking at, analysing and deciding what to do with buildings. In many cases, restoration plans had to be rethought through and then rethought through again, and then finally rethought through again, and in some cases actually abandoned as the earthquakes continued. In some cases, earthquake strengthening, emergency propping work, and even remedial work didn't save valuable buildings. Although some of our special buildings in Christchurch have survived, for example, the Christ College complex, the museum area, and the Arts Centre, although that has been badly damaged, it will be restored. Many of our well-loved buildings have been extremely badly damaged, and only some will be rebuilt. Of our two cathedrals, we have two. We have the Neo-Gothic Cathedral, which was designed by George Gilbert Scott and Benjamin Mountfort in our Cathedral Square. And then we also have the William Petrie, which is a French-style neoclassical Catholic basilica in Madras Street. And both these cathedrals are in that category. Also the Provincial Chambers, which is a particularly significant building. But the Provincial Chambers are in public ownership, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to rebuild those, although I suspect it's going to be a very long and probably gruelling task. Christchurch has been fortunate to have two distinctive cathedrals, and I've always enjoyed the story about George Bernard Shaw, who visited Christchurch in 1934 and complimented his hosts on the beautiful cathedral. And of course they thought that meant the cathedral in Cathedral Square. But no, he replied, it was that one down by the gasworks. And of course that is the Catholic cathedral, the Cathedral of the Blessed Sacrament, which is well known as probably one of the most beautiful buildings in Australasia. But back to emergency powers. The bill establishes a separate emergency authority process that applies in the case of natural disasters. These are the disasters that could cause or are likely to cause loss of life, injury or serious damage to property. The process will give Heritage New Zealand the ability to process archaeological authorities more speedily following a state of emergency. The timeframes are shorter, reflecting the emergency context, and are not limited to working days. In other words, weekends and public holidays must be included in the calculation of times. It will be very pleasing if something good can come out of the Christchurch earthquakes, and that we can use the experience to ensure that this legislation is fit for purpose and can be used in future disaster situations. I think it's timely that we review this present Act, and I think it's important that we get the legislation right. Therefore, I commend this bill to the House.
Honourable Shane Jones.